Well, I don't know about you guys, but I am still catching my breath from what was a very, very exhilarating, chaotic, and quite frankly, very fun to watch British Grand Prix. Wow. I don't think anyone expected a race that good, even though normally the British Grand Prix, generally speaking, doesn't fail to deliver. But man alive, what a race. At one point, it looked like at least 3 or 4 different people could and probably should have been winning it. But in the end, it is that man, Carlos Sainz, who started on pole this morning, this afternoon rather. Well, he ended up taking the win, but as I said, very dramatic circumstances. You'd think starting from pole and taking a win makes it a straightforward race. Man, this 2022 British Grand Prix was anything but straightforward. But of course, let's get the most obvious thing out of the way. First of all, is that all of us are very glad that Zhou Guanyu is okay, because man, that was a very bad crash to suffer in the beginning of the race. If you guys didn't see it, go ahead and check it out. Although I warn you, it's not exactly easy viewing, but man, he was okay. But of course, the fact that the crash happened early in the race and led to 3 cars actually retiring and 2 other cars suffering damages meant obviously that you'd be getting a red flag to begin with. So that's exactly what happened. Obviously, all of us were waiting and waiting and waiting for when exactly the race would finally start. The race did finally start at 8:26 p.m. IST, but when it started, my god, as I said, no one was disappointed with how the race went in the end, because as I said, Sainz was leading the race to begin with, but Leclerc was going faster, and Leclerc was going faster despite actually suffering a bit of damage at the restart, which controversially was a standing restart with grid positions reset. So that was obviously a bit of a problem. And then, at one point it seemed like Verstappen could have won the race, but Max Verstappen, as luck would have it, well, he ended up suffering a bit of a puncture to begin with. Then after he got his tires changed, there were some aerodynamic problems with his car, particularly with the rear of the car, because he didn't have much in the way of rear end. So he was obviously a bit unfortunate, because honestly, with Leclerc not actually, with Sainz at one point suffering with the, he was not really the quickest, and Leclerc was catching him. At one point, Hamilton was catching him. It would have been a very interesting thing. Of course, if you're a Max Verstappen and a Red Bull fan, you'd be left wondering what could have been, because obviously this was a race that was in many ways there for Verstappen to win. He was early on in the race, much faster than Carlos Sainz. He even overtook Carlos Sainz later on, but as I said, that puncture happened and his race just changed entirely. So that was the major problem when it came down to it for him. Obviously not exactly ideal, but such is the way things go. And of course, what that did was it left the race wide open, because you thought, okay, would the Ferraris fight it out against one another? Because there were a lot of debates going on here in our newsroom. We'll be thinking, okay, will the Ferraris fight, or will team orders come into play? In the end, it was a bit of both, because there was some fighting. At one point, it did seem like there were even team orders enforced, but the real drama came towards the end of the race, because remember, there was a yellow flag when Esteban Ocon retired, because he retired right in the middle of the track. The yellow flag, safety car was brought out, and that was when everything suddenly changed. Suddenly you're thinking, okay, anyone can win this race, because before that point, Hamilton was actually driving very, very fast. He had put in numerous, fastest laps of the race, and he was catching both Ferraris. Of course, it's worth noting that Leclerc, as I said, also had some front wing damage, which was ensuring he lost a bit of downforce and therefore some speed. So, but when the car safety car was brought out, most teams went for a tire change, and it was a tire change, ironically, that did in Mercedes' chances, because after the pit stop happened, Hamilton actually asked on radio, did we make the right choice of tire? Because remember, the Mercedes was doing very, very well on the medium tires, and even the hards for that matter, once he came in. But they couldn't quite get the red soft tires up to temperature early, and that's why you could see that early parts of the race he was struggling. Sergio Perez, who at that point had pretty much been discounted from everything, ended up finishing second. So excellent race for him. He actually salvaged a good chunk of points for Red Bull, because again, Verstappen, as we know, only ended up finishing 7th. So But at one point, there was a nice little sequence also towards the end of the race where Perez and Leclerc were fighting for second and third. And because both of them were fighting, Lewis Hamilton snuck in, overtook them both, came second, was in second. Of course, in the end, he finished third. But again, a very good race for the Mercedes driver. And of course, you could say it was a very contrasting race for the Mercs, because remember that crash which ended up getting the race red flagged, that was caused by, of course, George Russell. So he ended up kind of clattering into the back of Zhou Guanyu, and they ended up kind of they crashed, and then there was a bunch of other cars which ended up crashing. Russell eventually had to retire, even though Mercedes were trying to get the car fixed in time. So actually a bit of a race to forget if you're George Russell. Remember, first time he's racing in front of home fans in a car that was actually very competitive. So bit of a disappointment for him. So you have to feel for him a little bit, but of course at this point you're just happy that Zhou Guanyu was okay. And there were 3 retirements before the race, but that didn't really end up causing much in terms of there was no lack of drama, because there was a lot of drama. In fact, if I run through the top 4, it's of course you have the Sainz in first, Leclerc in fourth, Perez in second, Hamilton in third. The order after that, I mean, you have Fernando Alonso finish in fifth. Excellent drive from him, and in the Alpine, very, very good drive. Lando Norris, again another home favorite, finished in 6th. Max Verstappen finished in 7th, but only just because he had to fend off a late charge from Mick Schumacher. Yes, you heard that right. Mick Schumacher has broken his points duck in F1. He's finally gotten some points on the board, and of course, an 8th place finish means he gets a good number of points. He gets 3 points if I'm not wrong, or 4 points, but he could have actually gotten 7th place. So, but anyway, Sebastian Vettel in 9th, and that final point score goes to Kevin Magnussen. So in a way, pretty good race for Haas, considering that they were starting from the back of the grid, and they ended up with both their drivers getting points. So very good race for them. Race to forget, obviously, in some ways, for Daniel Ricciardo. He was in 13th place. Yuki Tsunoda was the last of the drivers who actually was, classified, who finished the race. So again, very bad race for even the AlphaTauris, because we had Pierre Gasly retire beforehand. Valtteri Bottas, in case you're wondering what happened to the other Alfa Romeo, well, he too had to retire with a cooling problem. And Esteban Ocon, as I mentioned earlier, also had to retire. So this race actually saw 6 retirements take place. But what a race it was in so many ways. And I was actually very, very glad that we were getting to watch this race, because at one point, and again, this is something that you'll see on our Instagram soon enough, we had 3 different things being viewed on 3 different screens. So we had the India-England test match going on, we had the India-England hockey match, women's hockey match going on another screen, and we had the British Grand Prix going on the third. So it was nuts. We were all having a lot of fun, and at one point we had actually forgotten about the other, we had actually forgotten about the other events, because the race was so enthralling. I can't tell you just how exciting it was at one point. I personally very happy that we actually got to check it out like that. And of course, the next round, which was going to be happening, is of course going to be happening just next week. In fact, July 10th, 1 week from now, we have the next race, because the race is going to be taking place in Austria. Home race for Red Bull. Let's see if they can get, on some points. So I'm going to take a few of your comments. Ashish Gupta first. He says, cannot understand the Ferrari strategy. They did not know who to promote for the championship. I agree. I think it would normally make sense to tell Leclerc to, hold position. But it is also worth noting that Leclerc was the slower of the 2 Ferraris due to his car problems. So it would have made no sense to tell Sainz to hold position, given that. Love Rami says that, Mercedes secured 3rd position, really merry for Hamilton. I'll be having 3 drinks tonight along with the Red Bull, okay? Enjoy that, man. And Piyush Plavan says, great chance for Leclerc to take massive points over Verstappen, but in the end he just took 6 points. Yeah, I think that, that front wing damage that he had didn't help his calls at all. I'm very surprised they didn't actually change his nose when he went in for the pit stops, but that was the choice they made. And he ended up running with a little less downforce. So that was the major problem, and that's why he couldn't take any points off him. And yes, Love, next up is Austria, the Red Bull Ring, or the Ostrich Ring in, Spielberg. So that's always a nice race. I enjoy that track very much. It's very small, very, very attacking, 3 DRS zones. And as Abhinav says, Ferrari's strategies, man, yeah, it's very questionable. Their strategic calls are not improving at all. But what did improve, if you're a fan, was the race quality, because today's race was very close. I mean, we could have had 3 or 4 different race winners at one point. So that's always great. very exciting race, and I personally am very pumped that we'll be having back-to-back F1 race weeks, because not only do I get to watch them, I get to actually talk about that stuff with you guys. So I'm bringing an end to this particular video. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you enjoy what it is that we do, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, tap the bell so that you know when we're going live or posting a new video. Thank you again, once again, for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Dias, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye bye and take care.